Try this right now before you do anything else. Stand up and see if you can balance on one leg for 10 seconds. Hold that thought, because in a moment, I'll tell you why that single silly-looking test is now considered one of the most accurate predictors of how long you're going to live, more accurate than almost anything checked at your average physical. Not your cholesterol, not your blood pressure, not a scan, not a blood draw, not a number on a chart. If you can still do certain everyday things at 70, things you've probably stopped thinking about entirely because they feel so ordinary, you are statistically aging better than most people your age. Not because of a supplement, not because of a diet, because your body is quietly passing tests that most bodies your age are quietly failing. I want to walk you through 8 of these markers today, counting them down one at a time. Some of them will surprise you because they're not the things you'd expect a doctor to care about. And I need to tell you now, the very last one, number 1, is based on a test almost no physician performs during a routine checkup, even though the research behind it is some of the most striking in the field. So stay with me until the end, because once you hear what it is, you'll probably try it before you finish watching. But before we start counting down, I want to ask you something simple. Drop your age and where you're watching from in the comments right now, and tell me which of these 8 things you already know you can do without a second thought. I read every comment on this channel, and I want to know where you stand before we even get into the science. Let me tell you about Diane first, because her story is the reason I wanted to make this video. Diane is 74, from a small town outside Sacramento, and for years, she believed she was simply getting old the way everyone does. Stiff mornings, a little unsteady getting up from the couch. Nothing dramatic. Then her granddaughter challenged her, half joking, to sit down on the living room floor and stand back up without using her hands or knees for support. Diane couldn't do it. Not because she was in pain, but because her body had quietly lost the strength and coordination to manage a movement she used to do without thinking. That moment sent her looking for answers, and what she found changed how she thought about her own health. So let's start where Diane did. Number 8, get up off the floor. This test sounds almost too simple to matter, but a landmark study out of Brazil followed thousands of adults for 12 years, and 4,000 adults for 12 years using exactly this test. Researchers called it the sitting rising test. You sit down on the floor, then stand back up, and you're scored out of 10 points, losing points every time you use a hand, a knee, or a piece of furniture for support. Now here's the number that should stop you. People who scored a perfect 10 had a 12-year mortality rate of under 4%. People who scored in the lowest range, needing multiple points of support just to get up, saw mortality rates climb above 40%. Read that again. After adjusting for age, sex, and other health conditions, the lowest scorers were nearly 4 times more likely to die of natural causes, and 6 times more likely to die of cardiovascular causes, compared to those who could do it cleanly. This isn't about flexibility for its own sake. Getting up off the floor requires leg strength, core stability, balance, and coordination working together in a single movement, and that combination turns out to be one of the most efficient snapshots of your whole body condition that exists. Don't panic if you struggled with it just now. This is trainable. Practicing controlled sit to stand movements from a low chair and gradually working toward the floor rebuilds exactly the strength this test measures. But this isn't the marker doctors talk about most. There's a much more common one, hiding in your kitchen, that most people have never once connected to how long they'll live. Here it is, number 7, and it lives right on your kitchen counter, opening a stubborn jar lid, or carrying in every one of your own grocery bags in a single trip without asking for help. This comes down to grip strength, one of the strangest, most powerful predictors doctors have ever found. In a massive global study called PURE, published in The Lancet, researchers tracked nearly 140,000 adults across 17 countries. What they found was that grip strength predicted death more strongly than systolic blood pressure did. For every 5 kilograms of grip strength lost, the risk of death from any cause rose by 16%. Not because your hands matter on their own, but because grip strength mirrors your overall muscular health, and muscle is what quietly protects you from falls, hospitalization, and the slow slide into needing help with daily life. If you can still wrestle open a tight jar, or haul in the groceries without stopping halfway up the driveway, your muscular system is doing something a lot of 70-year-olds' bodies can no longer manage And if it's gotten harder recently, this is one of the most responsive things to change. Because muscle answers to resistance training faster at every age than almost any other tissue in the body. But grip strength only tells part of the story. The next one shows up the moment you leave the house. Number 6. And this one, your own staircase, will tell you in 60 seconds flat. Climbing a full flight without stopping to catch your breath halfway up. Cardiologists in Spain, presenting research through the European Society of Cardiology, put this exact scenario to the test. They had patients climb 4 flights of stairs, about 60 steps at a brisk pace, and compared the results to full laboratory exercise testing. People who could climb those 4 flights in under a minute were consistently hitting 9 to 10 metabolic equivalents of effort, a level of cardiovascular performance that's been linked in prior research to an annual mortality rate of roughly 1% or less. On the other hand, anyone who needed longer than a minute and a half showed measurably weaker heart performance on the lab testing that followed. Your heart doesn't lie to you on a staircase. It either keeps up, or it tells you something, right then and there. If you can still take the stairs without needing to stop and lean on the railing, your cardiovascular system is operating at a level that a lot of people decades younger have already lost. And if stairs have started to feel harder lately, this is one of the more forgiving markers to rebuild, because the heart and lungs respond to gradual aerobic effort at almost any age. Something as simple as a short daily walk, with a few gentle inclines worked into it, is often enough to start nudging that number back in the right direction. And there's a fourth marker, one you're probably using right this second, without giving it a second thought, that turns out to matter just as much. Now, if any of this is landing for you, take 1 second and hit subscribe. This channel brings you research like this every week, the kind that rarely comes up at a routine doctor's visit. And if there's someone in your life who'd want to know exactly where they stand, send them this video today. You're using this one every time you cross a parking lot. Number 5. Walking at a pace that gets you across a street before the light changes without feeling rushed or breathless. Researchers at the University of Pittsburgh pooled data from over 34,000 adults over the age of 65 across 9 separate long-term studies and published their findings in JAMA. What they discovered is that gait speed, how quickly you naturally walk, is now considered a genuine vital sign, on par with blood pressure or heart rate, because it predicted survival with startling consistency. Every 1/10 of a meter per second of walking speed you gained was tied to roughly a 12% lower risk of death over the following years. People walking at a confident, purposeful pace were quietly outliving people who shuffled, even when the two groups looked similar on paper otherwise. Your walking pace is a live readout of your cardiovascular system, your nervous system, your muscles, and your balance, all working together in real time, every single time you cross a room. Let me tell you about Harold, because his story is the pattern interrupt I promised you. Harold is 79, a retired mail carrier from Ohio, and he'd assumed his slower pace was just what happens to everyone eventually. He hadn't fallen, he hadn't been diagnosed with anything. He just quietly accepted less. When his daughter mentioned this exact research to him, he decided, almost as an experiment, to start walking briskly for 20 minutes most days. Nothing extreme, just intentional. 8 months later, at his own request, his doctor timed his gait speed in the office. It had measurably improved. Her response stuck with him. Gait speed. She said improves at almost any age if you simply give it a reason to. Number 4 happens after the lights go off, and most people have never once thought to measure it, falling asleep and staying asleep on a fairly consistent schedule, night after night, without your bedtime drifting all over the place. A large systematic review pooling data from more than 92,000 adults across 14 countries found something researchers didn't fully expect. How consistent your sleep timing is may matter almost as much as how much sleep you get. People whose sleep and wake times varied wildly from night to night showed worse outcomes across a wide range of health measures than people who kept a steady, almost boring schedule. Your body relies on a fairly rigid internal clock to manage everything from hormone release to tissue repair to immune function, and that clock works best when you don't keep resetting it. If you're someone who goes to bed and wakes up around the same time most days, whether or not that sounds impressive to you, you're protecting something a lot of people don't realize is even at stake. And if your schedule has drifted, the fix isn't a supplement or a gadget. It's picking a wake-up time you can hold 7 days a week, weekends included, and letting your bedtime settle around it naturally. What you do with your mind during the hours you're awake matters just as much. And the next one on this list is the marker almost nobody thinks to train on purpose. Number 3. Staying genuinely curious. Learning something new on purpose, whether that's a language, an instrument, a new recipe technique, or a skill you never had time for during your working years. The clearest proof of this comes from the largest cognitive training trial ever conducted in the United States, called ACTIV, funded by the National Institutes of Health and tracking more than 800 older adults for 2 decades. Participants who went through structured mental training and later a couple of short booster sessions were 25% less likely to be diagnosed with dementia over the following 20 years than those who received none at all. 25% from a handful of training sessions decades earlier. Researchers call this cognitive reserve, a buffer your brain builds that helps it withstand age-related change without symptoms showing. Novel, challenging mental activity is one of the most reliable ways to build it, because familiar routines don't ask your brain to form new connections the way genuine learning does. This isn't about doing the same crossword every morning. It's about the specific, slightly uncomfortable feeling of being a beginner again at something. The specific skill matters far less than the discomfort of not yet being good at it. Struggling through the first clumsy weeks of a new hobby is not a sign you've chosen the wrong one. It's the entire mechanism at work. And the next marker on this list works on your brain in almost the exact same way, except it involves other people. Number 2, keep up a circle of people. Not passive contact, but ongoing conversation. Chronic isolation carries a high mortality risk, 15 cigarettes a day. Laughter and connection on a consistent basis. This is where the research gets almost hard to accept. A landmark analysis out of Brigham Young University, reviewing data from more than 300,000 people across 148 separate studies, found that chronic social isolation carries a mortality risk comparable in size to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Let that sit for a moment. And more recently, an ongoing study out of Rush University, tracking nearly 2,000 adults, found that the least socially active among them developed dementia, on average, a full 5 years earlier than the most socially active, a 38% difference in overall risk. If you still have a standing lunch with a friend, a weekly call with someone who makes you laugh, a group you show up to regularly, you're protecting your brain and your body in a way that very few prescriptions can match. And now, number 1, the one I promised you at the very beginning. The test almost no doctor performs during a routine physical, even though the research behind it may be the single most striking finding on this entire list. Standing on one leg, unsupported, for 10 seconds. In 2022, Brazilian researchers published a study in the British Journal of Sports Medicine that followed over 1,700 adults between the ages of 51 and 75 for an average of 7 years. The test was almost absurdly simple. Take off your shoes, place the front of one foot against the back of the opposite calf, arms at your sides, and hold it for 10 seconds. Nearly 1 in 5 people couldn't do it. And here's the part that stunned even the researchers. People who failed that simple 10-second test had an 84% higher risk of dying from any cause over the following years, compared to those who passed even after accounting for age, weight, and existing health conditions. Balance is one of the last physical abilities most people think to train, and yet it may be one of the very first things quietly connected to how long and how well you live. If you can do this right now, unsupported, for 10 full seconds on each leg, you are ahead of a genuinely large share of people your age, in a way that almost nobody is currently measuring. So here's where that leaves you. 8 everyday things: rising off the floor, gripping a jar, climbing a flight of stairs, walking at a confident pace, sleeping on a steady rhythm, staying curious, staying connected, and holding your balance on one leg for 10 seconds. None of them require a gym membership or a prescription. They require attention and the willingness to treat these ordinary movements as the meaningful signals they actually are. If you could do all 8, you've earned the right to feel proud of that. If a few gave you pause, that's not a verdict, it's information, and every one of these is trainable starting today. Diane, the woman from the start of this video, still won't say she loves sitting on the floor. But 6 months after that afternoon with her granddaughter, she gets up off it without her hands, and she says it changed how she thinks about every year she has left. A quick note, this video is for general education, not personalized medical advice. So talk with your own doctor before starting anything new, especially if you have a health condition. Especially if you have a health condition or a history of falls. Subscribe if this was worth your time, and tell me in the comments which of these 8 you're already strong in. I read every answer, and I'll see you in the next one.